right, so welcome back everybody to our latest episode of The Nest. After a week off, we are back and we have a packed show today as we will be reviewing the 2021 to 2022 season for the Boston Celtics, who lost the NBA Finals 4-2 against the Golden State Warriors. And joining me for today's episode are co-hosts Anirban Chakraborty, Rohan Venkatesh, and Ujan Talukdar. How are you all doing today?
Good to be here. Good to be here. I mean, of course, I wish the Celtics won it, but I'm happy. I'm happy with the way the season turned out.
Yeah, I'm doing. It's good to be back for sure. It's been a little while for me.
Yeah, lots of sports as always, and let's talk about it.
Yeah, and before we do that, so we're also I'm very excited to mention that once again back with us is Arnav Roy, and welcome back for today's episode. Arnav is a mental health advocate and content creator, most well known for being the host of the Grateful Living podcast, a podcast that shares mental health and life advice content through interviewing people from different walks of life. And Arnav joined us last year in an episode where we were discussing the 2021 NBA Finals. And at the time, we were known as the CV Update. So we are happy to have him back today. And stay tuned at the very end of this episode when you can learn more about his podcast. So Arnav, welcome back after a year. And welcome to your first episode of The Nest. Last time you were in the CV Update.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much, Amartya and Rohan and Ujan and Anirban. It's awesome. It's an honor for me to be here. And excited to talk sports and the Celtics.
All right, sounds good. So let's begin the discussion. So the first question, we have a panel of questions today, so we'll just be discussing this in a roundtable format, virtually. So, all right, so the first thing, there were many things that went wrong for the Celtics during the finals. What is like kind of the one thing which you would say hurt them the most? So what's Arnav, I just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, no, it's for me, it was the offensive output in general. As you guys saw, 4 out of 6 games, the Celtics scored 97 points or less. And then, between Derek White, Grant Williams, and Peyton Pritchard, the 3 of them combined for 16.7 points per game through the finals. That's really not going to cut it for, to win a championship. And then obviously the turnovers were big. I think they averaged 16.8 turnovers during the finals. And then throughout the playoffs, they were 1-8 when they committed 16 or more, and then 13-2 when it was under 16. So for me, give credit to the Warriors on their defensive effort and attention to detail. They really stifled the Boston Celtics. It's rare in the modern era to have a series where you score 97 or less 4 out of the 6 games. So that's something that I felt like the Celtics really never figured out.
Yeah, I would have to say like the highlight of this in terms of the Celtics, failure to beat the Warriors, it's definitely got to be on the offensive front. Granted, I guess that this team has always kind of been a defense first team, right? Obviously with Marcus Smart being the defensive player of the year and stuff. And to credit to the Boston defense, the defense did a decent job. I won't say that they did a bad job, but against this Warriors juggernaut, it just didn't cut it, right? Because the Celtics did a good job of keeping them out of the paint, keeping those passing lanes closed in tough areas. But it didn't really mean much when they could just pass it out to Steph Curry and you would just have a wide open 3. And yeah, those were tough shots, but when you have someone like Steph Curry just shooting 3 after 3, there's not really much you can do about that. So that's definitely one factor. Obviously, Jason Tatum, I don't know what it was. Maybe the stage of being at this final stage kind of got to him, but he just wasn't the Jason Tatum that we were used to seeing. And I've said in the past that this team lives and dies by Jason Tatum's performance, and that was largely the case in the finals over here. But at the same time, he didn't really get a lot of help from the rest of his team either. Marcus Smart, I think he averaged around 5 assists a game, which is well below what we're used to seeing from Marcus Smart. And of course, he got decent contributions from Jalen Brown, and the bench usually kind of backs up the star players, but we didn't really see that this time. So a lot of those things that kind of kept the Celtics going the first few rounds, it just kind of either fell flat or didn't really show up in the finals. Now, I don't entirely blame the Celtics for that because you're going up against Steve Kerr's team. I mean, Steve Kerr's a great coach. I got to give it to him. And I mean, when you're going up against the best players, like one of the best, like Steph Curry, I mean, arguably the best, right? I mean, I would definitely put him up with LeBron. I mean, I would argue he's at this point, maybe he might even be better than LeBron. So it was definitely a tough test. Obviously, that's not an excuse for losing, but I truly do think that that if you're going to go down, this is not a bad way to go down.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys have said there, and I think another factor. I mean, you've mentioned kind of how the Celtics bench didn't really have that scoring threat in the really critical second half of the series. But to contrast that with the Golden State Warriors, I mean, you look at their bench and you have to say that players like Gary Payton in the second and Jordan Poole were really, really important. I mean, Jordan Poole, for example, had 15 points in like Game 6 in the crucial game clinching win. And otherwise, even Looney had 7 rebounds, I think, in Game 6 as well from the bench. And we just didn't really have that much of a contribution on our end, and that was a really big problem because throughout the game we saw that when the Warriors took out Steph Curry or something, they just left someone like Jordan Poole in the game who proceeded to continue getting lots of points off us. When we took off our starters, we had players like Grant and Derek White, and oftentimes this was a problem because it really sapped our momentum. I think players like Derek White were really instrumental for us getting to the stage. We should absolutely not forget that, and we can't forget Grant Williams also having really important roles in the earlier playoff series that we played this year. But I think again, there was just that was, I think, the biggest difference, that when we took out our starters, we just didn't have it enough of a scoring threat or even really offensive output like rebounds or assists, those kinds of things. Whereas the Warriors really had a much, I think when it counted, their team became much deeper than ours.
I think you guys just really hit the nail on the head there. It's really, I think it was just the lack of offense. I wouldn't say defense was a problem because, take Game 6, for example, allowing 103 points to Golden State. I would say that's pretty good considering, there's Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, all that. But Jason, I felt like Jason Tatum tried to do a little too much. He was struggling from twos, and he was hitting as many threes as twos at some point in the finals. And even the wins, it didn't really come down to much of Jason Tatum. Remember, Game 1, it was the comeback, and Al Horford led the charge. And in Game 3, I thought it was more of like a really good performance from Jalen Brown more than Jason Tatum. It's not. I'm not going to say Jason Tatum was anonymous. I mean, he tried, but he didn't put up massive point totals in each game. I think he was trying to do that, but it just didn't really work out. And Golden State had a better defense, and that's saying something considering the Celtics had the defensive player of the year on their team. No,
I think it's just sort of a matter of the bench, being too much of a difference between these two teams. Having someone like Jordan Poole and Kevon Looney compared to Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, I think that was just too much of a difference to overcome in the series. And I think it was just the Celtics at times were just very sloppy with play. I think one of the plays that I felt was a real momentum killer was in the end of the third quarter in Game 5 when Jordan Poole hits a half-court three almost to give them a lead. After the Celtics had made such a big effort to come back and actually take the lead, just to sort of allow that at the very end, I felt really hurt them in the fourth quarter. So I think it was just sort of a matter of the bench being such a difference, not having someone like a Poole, not having someone like a Kevon Looney, not having someone like Gary Payton II, just sort of that type of difference in playmaking and scoring ability. I think overall the Warriors just had more scorers than the Celtics, right? Besides Tatum and Brown, and Horford had a great series, but I mean, he's not really a scoring type of player. The Warriors have Curry, Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Poole. Those four are very good scorers at the very least, right? So that's a big difference as well. But I think the turnovers, I wanted to sort of echo that again. Arnav, you mentioned your statistic about the turnover. I think the Celtics, I have it with 15 or fewer turnovers, but I think it's the same idea. 14-3 when they had 15 or fewer turnovers. And they were actually 0-7 in games where they had more than 15 turnovers. And that was the last 2 games of the finals. And it just sort of seemed like in Game 6 when they actually made sort of a run at the end to kind of cut it to 8 or 9 points. they just sort of still kept on making the same mistakes over and over again. And I think that's sort of what really hurt them in the end, like just making too many turnovers. Jason Tatum set the record, right, for most turnovers in a single postseason with 100. Though I'm not as worried about that because when you average that in over 24 games, that's roughly 4 turnovers a game, which isn't as bad as saying 100 turnovers. So I'm not really as worried about that, but I do feel like sometimes he pressured himself to do too much. Like there were a lot of passes he made, which you could tell from the get-go were doomed, like just not good passes. So I hope he really kind of reviews that in the film and corrects that in the offseason. Jalen Brown too. I mean, his handles obviously need a lot of work to be very nice. And he's a great player overall, but like it just seems like sometimes like Brown and Tatum, like they took a step in their game. But I think those things just sort of like the leaders just weren't ready at that stage compared to Golden State. So I think that was the biggest kind of difference for what hurt them in the end. They just, the moment was kind of probably too big for Tatum. And I don't think it was that big for Brown. I think Brown did well, but I think just everything combined, the Warriors just sort of use their experience. And that's a good, I guess, transition to the next point, because I want to sort of discuss, like, obviously this is the first Celtics team to make the finals since 2010. So that's been 12 years. This was the Warriors' 6th finals appearance in 8 years. So there's definitely an experience that comes into question here. So how much of a role do you think the experience came into play between these two teams? Yeah, I just sort of want to hear what you guys think about this.
I mean, it may have been a factor, but I think if you were to say that that's the cause, that's an extremely overrated factor because yes, this is a young team, the Celtics overall. Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown. I mean, with the exception of Al Horford, who's fairly like a senior player. I mean, the rest of the team is, it's somewhat experienced, but especially Tatum and Brown, they're pretty much in their first few years in the league, and while this was their first time on the final stage, it's not like they hadn't faced adversity before. They had to play a Game 7 against Milwaukee, and they had to play another Game 7 against the Heat, and beating Giannis's Bucks in a Game 7. That's no trivial thing. And in addition to that, they were up against far more experienced teams, arguably, right? The Nets, right? Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant were very, very experienced players, and we took them down. We swept them. So it's not like the Celtics cannot like play against experienced players or teams with experienced players. It's just that I think the Warriors were just that good, right? So at the end of the day, and at the same, and to add to that, it's yeah, I mean, the Warriors had Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, but I mean they had other players like Jordan Poole who's just not very experienced, right? So and as everyone mentioned earlier, I mean it really just came down to the bench stepping in, and that pretty much took place for the Warriors. Well, it didn't really happen for the Celtics in this series. So I would definitely say that despite the lack of experience, I mean all these teams they play against one another. They can study each other's play. They can study film. Yeah, it's not the same as playing, but there's a lot more information at hand, and especially in this day and age. So I don't think that experience is as much of a factor in terms of raw skill. I think the Celtics definitely have what it takes to really compete and be a competitor and to be a contender for a really, really long time. Whether they keep on getting this far, that's another story. But I wouldn't really worry about the Celtics because I think that their trajectory is mainly upward from this point. That's not to say that they're going to make the finals again and again and again, but I think that overall this is a well-managed, well-coached team, and they just fell short this time. It really just comes down to that.
I would say that experience did play a factor. The reason being is, you mentioned, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, I'll even put Draymond Green. Even if one of them is not playing, Golden State brings off Andre Iguodala. He was there from the first NBA Finals of this run. The Celtics, yes, you mentioned that playoff experience is there, but it's not the same. But the NBA Finals is a different beast. Like it's I would say it's more than just the court being painted with the NBA final, the Larry O'Brien trophy on the court. It's more than that. It's I don't know if it has to do with like the later starts or
but it's still the same teams with the same players with the same raw skills.
I understand that, but it's for a younger team against more seasoned and a team that's gone to the NBA Finals for 6 times in, we'll call it the last decade. of course, experience is gonna win out in that. I mean, and I just feel like, the Celtics had a 2-1 lead after game 3. And maybe it's just a matter of, they kind of got worn out from games 4, 5, and 6. I mean, it was definitely evident in game 6, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think experience, I agree with you, Jen. I think experience definitely sort of played a role later on. I mean, if you remember in 2015, you mentioned that the Warriors were down 2-1 to the Cleveland Cavaliers back then, and they ended up winning the last 3 games, kind of really what happened in this situation. So they kind of know how to approach being down in the series 2-1, especially late, right? So they've been there like several times. I think in the NBA Finals, the last round, experience really kind of comes down. Like if you remember 2012 with the Oklahoma City Thunder, that year they beat the Dallas Mavericks, who had won the championship the year before. The Lakers, who were still led by Kobe Bryant at the time, they had 5 championships over the 2000s, over 10 years. And then they beat San Antonio Spurs, another championship winning team, over and over again. And then they lost to Miami in 5 games. And I think experience really helped there for the Miami Heat, who were led by LeBron James and Dwayne Wade at the time, who both had been to the finals before that. So I think experience really kind of comes into play in this final round more than other series. Why that happens, I mean, I don't know if it's maybe the late start, maybe it's the pressure of actually being this close to the championship. Because like round 1, the Celtics looked really good against Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, right? Like Tatum outplayed Kevin Durant in that series altogether. So like compare that to like this final round. I mean, Tatum was outplayed completely by Steph Curry. So I think experience really helps for this team going forward. So I mean, I will say it played a role, but I am kind of curious, like how Arnav, Nearby, what you guys are going to say about this?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I definitely think it played a part in terms of, kind of like the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals is a different beast in terms of the large amount of media, the amount of availability you have to have, all that's going on in terms of family asking for tickets, things like that. You know, the Warriors have already been there and understand how to handle that, right? All these guys, it was their first time. There was for the Warriors, there was 123 games of finals experience. For the Celtics, it was 0. So, and I think it, you know, it's a question of maybe semantics of is it experience or the moment being too big or whatever. I think from an off the court perspective, and then even on the court, I mean, just coming out game 1, I mean, one of us could have done a better job on Steph. I mean, it was like they didn't even know the scouting report of what was going on. I mean, the amount of wide open shots he had in game 1,
He had
just to
6
start
threes in
off.
the first quarter,
Yeah.
remember?
Yeah. I mean, it was just, for me, there's no way to not think that experience played a factor. And I mean, I think that brings up an interesting question of, maybe that's a little bit on Brad, to go for the Warriors to have 123 games between their players and for us to have 0. Why don't we have a Udonis Haslam? Why don't we have an Andre Iguodala on this team? And does that need to be addressed as a way to keep
Well, everyone needs
things
to have
in
a first
check?
time at some point.
But I mean, I think having someone to keep people in check, that's where, when the Warriors lose game 1 and Draymond doesn't overreact and kind of keeps the locker room in check, we didn't have that kind of presence, the way the Miami Heat had Udonis or the Warriors had, you know, Andre Iguodala.
I
I
guess
think
to
that's
counter
something
that
that,
though,
yeah.
what about Milwaukee? I guess Milwaukee last year when they were down 2-0, who's like the championship presence on that team? Like with regards to that, right? Like, I mean, at that point they were all pretty. I mean, PJ Tucker is a veteran, but he had never played in an NBA Finals until last year. So I guess like the counter that, like, what about like Milwaukee in 2021 and Toronto? I guess in
I would,
2019 had Kawhi Leonard, who was a champion. So like,
I would
I
say
guess
that I was gonna say that for 2021 there was also Phoenix, and Phoenix it was almost like it was kind of evenly matched up in the sense that Phoenix was also in a similar boat to the Celtics in that they have a really young team, but like with one seasoned veteran in Chris Paul, and with our seasoned veteran being Al Horford. So I feel like Phoenix and Celtics, I could see some parallels there. What about you guys?
Yeah. Oh, Arnav, did you want to say something?
No, I think it's a good counterpoint. I just think in general, I think if I'm Brad this offseason, I need to get someone that can, I think from a locker room leadership perspective, um, we need someone that kind of be that, 15th guy who's not going to play, but is going to handle the locker room. I mean, I think there were a lot of instances here in terms of the runs that the Warriors made, whether you talk about a 21-0 run in game 6, a 35-14 run in the third quarter of game 2. There's just, I mean, game 4 is actually prime example. It's 94-90 and the score ends up being 107-17, a 17-3 run with like under 4 minutes to go. I mean, that's, the moment was too big. They need some. Al's a great guy in terms of that, but Al didn't have a lot. Just in my opinion, that I think they need someone that has been there in the finals and has won, who can kind of be somewhat of a locker room presence. Because I mean, the runs that the Warriors made were just, it's very uncharacteristic of a mature team, and I think they could use a veteran presence.
Yeah, I think the good thing about that is that you don't necessarily even need that 15th roster spot. I mean, when you talk about veteran presence, that can just mean having an experienced Celtics player on the coaching staff or just something like that to be in the huddle. I mean, we have plenty of Celtics legends. Who have been to the finals, and otherwise, like you said, it's not even that hard to find some ex players and really also have them in the coaching staff. I mean, look at the Warriors; they had like a total of 3 people with head coaching experience on their coaching staff, right? So it's very doable in that regard. You don't even have to have a player like Udonis Haslem who's just been there for so long. But I do want to kind of operationalize, like when we talk about experience, yeah, how does that actually operationalize into the game? And in my opinion, that kind of comes from the Celtics reverting to maybe some bad habits and tendencies when they kind of go down and hit the panic button like you're talking about. I'm specifically talking about how many times we saw in game 5 and game 7 the kind of or like late 2021 style where they try to go iso ball or drain down the clock to like 2 seconds and shoot a contested 3 that has like zero chance of going in. I mean, when we were up by 6 in game 6, right, in the first quarter, when we had that early kind of surge that Steve Kerr said they're going to weather, I mean, we were up by 6, 2 possessions. I think Poole like drained one, brought it back to 1, and then I believe Tatum had another kind of drain down the clock from 24 seconds, shoot a contested 3 and miss. And right at that moment, like you just feel the momentum kind of shifting, that we were up, now all of a sudden they're back within scoring distance. These kinds of decisions that they made really ended up mattering, and I think that's what, when we talk about experience, I agree that it's a really hard thing to define, but for me, I think it comes from us really reverting back to those bad habits from earlier in the season, whereas the Warriors just really kept playing the same way, no matter whether they were up or down by a lot. They just kept hoping that their shots would eventually hit the kind of predicted probability, and eventually they did, or exceeded it, and then we paid the price.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something like I do hope that they can sort of address it. Like I think now though that they have players who've been in the finals, Al Horford hopefully will have learned a lot from this, and he can become an even greater mentor next year to hold the team in check. But yeah, I guess that's sort of something that you have to kind of consider now. And I guess let's move on to the next question now, which is sort of, we've talked about Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole. So this question is really just the Warriors scoring depth. I mean, it was very good comparative to the other teams the Celtics played in the playoffs. They had the best offense, like by comparison, compared to Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Miami, right? I mean, the Warriors, we saw Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Jordan Poole all having terrific performances in the series. So for the Celtics, this question is, do you think that they need to add a third scorer through a trade? Or do you have enough faith in players like Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, or maybe even Aaron Nesmith, who can blossom into kind of a more of a scoring type role? Not necessarily like a star, but like, do you have faith that they can develop one of these players to become even better? Or do you want to see them add someone like Kyle Kuzma, Bruce Brown in free agency or trade?
No, I think the chemistry that exists on this team is is good enough that that team chemistry is what got them to this stage, right? And I would definitely say that, yeah, I mean, it's easy to point now to the fact that they lacked offense in the finals, and that's why they lost. But this has been a defense first team all season long. And without that, without their defensive play, they wouldn't have gotten this far. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't add someone else to strengthen their offense. But if it comes at the cost of defense, then no way. I say no deal if that's the case.
Okay, Rohan, let me just ask you one question now. This is for everyone. This is not part of the initial panel questions, but this has been brought up a lot now. So I just want to bring this up because this is relevant. There's been a lot of chatter about Kevin Durant being on the trade block, and specifically Kevin Durant for Jalen Brown. Like, I don't know if that would be a
no way.
But
no
who
way.
would be like? Does anyone like? What are your thoughts on this? Because this has been popping up recently a lot.
No.
I want to hear what you guys have to say.
The Tatum Brown chemistry has been dynamite all season long. Yeah, if you were to just point to the finals and say that it didn't click then, and just erase everything that they did all season, and then bring in like Kevin Durant, who pretty much doesn't have any chemistry with either of these guys. I think that's a borderline stupid move. I would even say it's kind of a shooting yourself in the foot kind of move. Anytime you sign these big name players on these large contracts, usually more often than not, I've seen that they go bust. I think it's a much better idea to take your existing players, the existing chemistry that's already there. And it's not like these are bad players. I mean, come on, like they made it to the finals. I mean, like all we need to do is just get them over the line. They were just about there to get them over the line. All it takes is a little bit more coaching, a little bit more practice. A little bit more like sharpening of the technical aspects, so that they don't make stupid mistakes. And of course, now they have the benefit of experience having been in the finals once. So yeah, if you were to break up that chemistry and bring in someone new, yeah, I mean, Kevin Durant's a great player on paper, but chemistry is just as important, if not more important. So I say no deal.
Okay, and by the way, I'm also against the trade of getting Kevin Durant just because, I mean, he's going to be 34, whereas Jalen Brown is 25. So I know obviously Jalen Brown will probably never reach Kevin Durant's ceiling, but at the same time, I also think Kevin Durant.
It's also a stupid payroll move.
Well, here's the thing: it's 34, right?
Payroll because you got. I mean, he's more experienced. I mean, he's had a lot of championships. So granted, you're probably gonna have to pay him a lot more. And I wouldn't want to see the Celtics.
Well, this would be through a trade, right?
Yeah, but I mean, you'd still be on the hook for the difference, and I mean, there's potential luxury taxes involved. It's just not a good situation to be in. I think it's lose-lose from the Celtics standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm in favor of keeping Brown because I think Brown has more long-term value at this point than Kevin Durant will have, right? I mean, Kevin Durant at age 34, how many great seasons, like Kevin Durant-esque seasons, are we going to see from him from 34 onwards? Maybe one or two, right? Jalen Brown has the rest of his 20s. He's only 25, so he has at least 4, 5, 6, 7 years of like prime Jalen Brown. I would probably take that at this point over Kevin Durant.
And also, too many shakeups is also really bad for the morale of the team, right? I mean, especially at a time right now when you just lost the finals. I mean, being a really good team and you lost the finals, I think the message should be to motivate these players to get better, not pretty much destroy morale by breaking up the team and just shaking things up too much. I think there's way too much of an instinct to try to blow the whole thing up just because you lose. That's a stupid decision.
But let me just also push back. Okay, so Kevin Durant, he won't be coming here. But what about someone like Kyle Kuzma or Bruce Brown, someone off the bench who can provide scoring, right? That would help the team, right?
I am not against adding players. I'm not against doing that. But if it comes to the high price, like giving up one of your star players, like Jalen Brown or something, yeah, if you want to prop up the bench, sure, that's fine. I get it, right? But I would say it shouldn't come at the cost of giving up a good defensive player. That's definitely true, and you should definitely not give up one of your star players. Definitely don't give up like your Browns, Tatums, et cetera, right? But that's I mean, there's always room to add people, but don't change the fundamental chemistry of this team. That's all I got to say to Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka.
Yeah, I mean, what are the rest of you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
you like Kevin Durant on the Celtics next year? We're just having a fun discussion right now. So
no, I would have loved to see it if it was 2016.
It's gonna be another Kyrie Irving episode. No.
Well, if it was 2016, I would have been okay with it. I mean, remember Kevin Durant came to New Hampshire and was and wanted to, or would have, let's be honest, he probably, if it weren't for Golden State, he would have come to Boston. But, you know, at this point, it's 2022 and Kevin Durant is 34 now. I mean, we already have an experienced player in Al Horford. And while I'm not exactly opposed to, you know, Kevin Durant's experience, he's won NBA Finals before, right? But like you said it, Omarta, he's 34, Jalen's 25. I would like to see Jalen Brown, how he does next year on the Celtics, considering they just came off an NBA Finals run, you know, versus, you know, Kevin Durant suddenly coming to Boston, being swept by them with let's be honest, a proven point guard in Kyrie Irving, and getting swept by the eventual Eastern Conference champions, right? I would like to have the you know, your core in Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart. I would like to have those core like stick together, right? And then add some role players. You know, Kyle Kuzma, I'd be okay with. You know, Bruce Brown, I'd be okay with. But you know, I don't think we need like necessarily, you know, like another star player. I mean, especially if it comes with like a massive contract, which it just wouldn't go well, because it would essentially be like, you know, maybe a year or two of perhaps like going to the NBA Finals if you get like a third, you know, proven player, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd say I agree. I don't think I have much more to add. I think you guys have really said it all.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously the age is a big thing. You know, the bigger thing, I think, you know, obviously chemistry is a huge thing but a move like that would be interesting, because right now they've established Jason as the number 1A and Brown as the 1B. And if you bring in Durant, I'm not sure how you kind of address that situation. Is he accepting a 1B role? So I think, for all the reasons you guys said, I'd rather have Jalen Brown.
Okay, 5-0. So we are thoroughly against Kevin Durant being on the Celtics next year. Will be very interesting if the trade ends up actually happening then. But yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, and I guess question 4 and 5, they're kind of blended together. So the first one is just sort of Jason Tatum. He didn't play well to his standards in the NBA Finals. 21.5 points, 6.8 rebounds, 7 assists. And I guess, what did the Warriors do against him that the other teams the Celtics faced in the playoffs didn't do as effectively? Because Tatum was terrific against Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Miami. So like, what really kind of was different? What did the Warriors kind of do differently? Let's just kind of quickly discuss this. If one or two of you want to just discuss this point.
I would definitely have to say that in this series, I mean, the Warriors were, I give like a lot of credit to them of effectively cutting off that Celtics attack, right? Because the core of that Celtics offense, Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, right? They were effectively able to cut them off essentially by essentially early on in a possession, they would make it kind of hard to pass the ball around, but somehow if they managed to get into the paint, that's when they would pretty much gang up and double team, right? Because usually when you're double teaming a guy, you risk leaving someone else open. And if you do that early in the possession, that's an especially bigger risk. But I think that the Warriors were able to time their double teams effectively, so that when you're pretty much in the paint and you're near the basket, it's pretty much, it's a lot harder to find other passing options, and that issue of leaving someone else open becomes less of an issue. And I feel like the Warriors did that especially tactfully, and they probably study this like day in and day out. I don't know, but my guess is that they probably study a lot of film, and once you look at pretty much how Jason Tatum was pretty much silenced as a result of that, I think that's a credit to the Warriors defense.
Yeah, and I also want to specifically mention Andrew Wiggins, who I thought did a phenomenal job defending Jason Tatum. And I mean, just overall, I think the Warriors, as you mentioned, Rohan, I think they did a terrific job in double teaming him, because obviously the downside of a double team is one guy's always left open. But I think the Warriors strategically did the double team in a way where they knew that Tatum would likely force out an errant pass. And I think they did that terrifically. So I think a lot of credit goes to the Warriors defense. I mean, I think Arnav really want to mention like the Warriors holding the Celtics to under 100 points in like 3 of the finals games. I mean, that's like unheard of. I agree with you, right? Like in today's NBA with so much more offense, the 3-pointer being shot so much more. I mean, the Warriors, I think, did a terrific job, like sort of neutralizing the Celtics offense. And yeah, I think overall that's sort of what the Warriors did. They just sort of they stepped up defensively in a way that Milwaukee, Miami, and Brooklyn was not capable of doing. So I think that was like the biggest issue. Does anyone else want to like kind of mention this? Because I just want to make sure we move on with the other questions. But does anyone else want to have anything else they want to discuss about that?
I think in large part, and kind of going back to your last question of, I think someone needs to be added to the bench in terms of playmaking. Brad has that right now. He has a $17.1 million trade player exception from the Evan Fournier deal. Getting a guy like Kuzma or Marcus Morris or Duncan Robinson or Jordan Clarkson, kind of the role that Jordan Poole plays for the Warriors. That would be big because Tatum averaged 40.7 minutes per game in the finals, and that's just because we didn't have playmakers to substitute in when he needs to take breaks. And you could tell game 6 with the shots that he was kind of coming up short, that he was tired. So, for me, obviously, as you said, Amartya, like Andrew Wiggins played outstanding one-on-one defense. They did a good job of sort of building somewhat of a wall and then, doing double teams here and there. But at a larger point, this is a lot to do with the lack of playmaking that the Celtics have, outside of Tatum.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, yep. I agree with you, Arnav. I think, yeah, like, and this could tie into another question. So I just want to answer this first question before we move on. So the next question is Jalen Brown. He had a very good finals, 23.5 points, 7.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists during the NBA finals, and overall a terrific season for him. And I guess my question is just very quickly for all of you guys, like a yes or no. Do you think he's capable of reaching a different level next season of play? I would say yes. I mean, I think he was outstanding this year. So I would
come
say
on,
yes.
man. That's a layup, man. You got to do better than that. Dude, it's Jalen Brown. He's like 25 years old. He's had a great season. His career's on an upward trajectory. He's playing alongside Jason Tatum, and yeah, there's really no reason to think that there are any downsides to his individual performance at this point. So yeah,
I would say that I hope he works on the handles, because if he is able to limit those turnovers next year, he will be borderline unstoppable. Like, he looks so good now compared to like his rookie season. It's amazing to see how much he's improved from rookie Jalen Brown in 2016 to 17 to now, where he just like dribbles and then he'll just pull up and make a shot. Like, it's amazing to see. Like, he's come a long way. So that's why I also kind of hope that the Celtics are able to keep him and Tatum, because I think there's a sense of being like proud of being able to draft 2 players and sort of have them develop and grow into these stars and hopefully eventually champions together. So yeah, I would say Jalen Brown definitely next season. I think he's in a good spot to make another All-Star appearance and maybe an All NBA spot as well this time.
Yeah, I think a big thing that Jalen can improve on is obviously ball handling, but the assists, it would be interesting if that could go up as well in terms of playmaking, as we talked about on the last question. If he can increase that ability, which I think Tatum did a great job this year improving. If Jalen can also be that type of player, that would be really interesting.
I'm with you. I'm with Arnold on that one. If he can get more assists, I think he would be a much better all around player. I think we saw with Jason Tatum, like, he's passing the ball more, and if Jalen Brown does that, I think on offense, the Celtics do like to pass the ball around. I mean, you see amazing ball movement, and if we get everybody to chime in with the assists, it would just, I think it would be much better for not only Jalen Brown, but the Celtics in general.
Okay, yeah, let's move on to our next question. So Brad Stevens in an interview recently discussed how the Celtics' poor start, they were 18-21, led to the team having to exert tremendous energy for the remainder of the season. So this kind of touches upon what Arnav, you were talking about, like adding the bench and what we've been mentioning. So what can the Celtics do this offseason to avoid another slow start and give their starting unit more rest to keep them ready for another deep playoff run?
Well, I'd say one thing is this time we have Rob Williams back, and presumably, I think the priority is really to get him 100% over the off season through whatever fitness regime or rehab regime he has to do. Because I mean, Game 6, we saw him. I mean, he got 10 points. He was blocking shots. He was doing everything he could to keep us in the game. I mean, honestly, without him, I think the game probably would have just been done in the first half. Really, I mean. So I'd say that's the biggest priority for us because he's just shown in the finals that he's going to be a tremendously important player for us moving forward. And I mean, under the bright lights of the finals, I'd say he performed really well. I'd say he did not look out of place in the finals at all. He was like I said, he was doing everything he could on the defensive end to keep us in the game. So for me, that's gonna be the biggest thing. I think if we get Rob Williams healthy and really get his defensive output. And also, let's not forget he adds a really different offensive presence as well. And I mean, obviously he's a tall guy, like near the paint, he's going to cause that concern. But even then, we saw him doing some really nice ball, like handling some nice passing and assists in the finals as well. I think having him back is just going to completely change our capacity as an offense next season.
I think too, part of the slow start this year was because of the new coach and adjusting to his style, and that luckily won't be a problem going into next year. Having had this season in the playoff run, so there's going to be less of that adjustment of how Ime's coaching versus how Brad was coaching, and just trusting. I think now, given this run, there's full trust in Ime, whereas there might have been an adjustment period of buying in our last season here.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, there's also just more trust in the overall team now, right? Like the team knows what they're capable of now. Like entering the season, like no one expected this team to reach the NBA Finals, right? To like entering the 21 to 22 season. So I think now that the team sort of knows what they're really capable of and kind of realizing this potential, I think it's going to be massive as well. I think in terms of like how they can kind of avoid another slow start and give rest is also like adding some players off the bench. So we mentioned Kuzma a lot. I specifically also highlighted Kuzma because Kuzma made a tweet where he talked about how much he loves Boston, which is very interesting. So I think that's something that really plays into Celtics' favor, as well as, I mean, Bruce Brown, I like him as well. Like I like what I saw from him in the first round against the Nets. So I think he can provide a lot of scoring punch as well. And there are a lot of other players like Otto Porter Jr., some other role players who I think if you can add them and just sort of take some like relief off the starters, then that's going to help them a lot, especially in the long season. So I don't think any major haul is really necessary at all. Like I think the core of Tatum, Brown, Smart, and Time Lord going forward into next year, I really like that core, at least for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Horford, I mean, I'm just not sure if we'll see what we saw from him last year because he is getting older. But if he can provide I still like him as like a defensive player. So overall, like I think that's what you've got to do. You got to add some players on the bench, and we'll see like what kind of happens like going forward. I don't think any major changes are there. I would fully expect this team to be back in the mix next season. Okay, I guess next question. There was a lot of discussion about the Milwaukee Bucks. I've heard this a lot from different analysts and experts who say that the Milwaukee Bucks not having Chris Middleton during the second round matchup, like, I mean, obviously definitely hurt them. The Bucks won 7 games with the Celtics without Middleton. So I guess the simple question, which team in the Eastern Conference are you seeing next year as the biggest threat to the Celtics in reaching another finals? For me, it's Milwaukee. I think Giannis himself took this team to 7 games. So, I mean, I think Milwaukee worries me the most. Philadelphia obviously will kind of always be there with Joel Embiid. Will he ever realize and get his team to the finals? With Doc Rivers, who has been to a finals before, but I would say for me it's Milwaukee. next year as the team that's probably the biggest threat to Boston again. What do you guys think?
Yeah, in my case, I think I generally agree that Milwaukee's generally a pretty big threat. I mean, they're a pretty good team, but I probably have to go with Philadelphia on this one. I think they had a lot more potential this year, and they kind of crashed out early in the second round against the Heat. Joel Embiid, I mean, he's the leading scorer in the league. So when you have that, that's not really a trivial thing. And as you mentioned, Doc Rivers, who does have experience coaching the finals, and he may even have knowledge about how the Celtics operate because he used to coach there, right? So if you take that into account, I would even say that Philadelphia is probably like the sleeper pick over here, because I think they're probably going to emerge when no one's expecting them to. Milwaukee, everyone expects them to be good, but at the same time, I just don't see Milwaukee putting up this kind of this kind of performance like they did repeatedly. Granted, I mean, this time they didn't have Chris Middleton, who was injured, but that's probably not going to be a factor for them in the future. But even then, you can't ignore Philly, and I would say that taking them down is probably going to be the biggest priority.
Yeah, I'd agree with the Bucks being a big threat. I mean, obviously they took us to 7 without Middleton. In the same vein, I'd say Miami's still going to be there. You could argue if they had Hero, we would have lost that series because they took us to 7, without him being really a factor in the last couple games. Those two are definitely going to be there. It'll be interesting what the Nets do. Obviously, Kyrie doesn't at this point have a long-term deal with them. And it, so we'll see. But if those three guys, Irving, Simmons, and Durant are on the same team, it's hard to think that they won't make the conference finals. So those are kind of the three teams that I would think are the biggest threat to the Celtics.
I'm going to say Miami. I'm actually going to just say Miami's like the biggest one. The reason being is they have I think it's going to be more of like a Celtics Heat kind of, I wouldn't say rivalry, but it's more of like a battle between those two. Think about it. In the bubble, 2020, it was who were in the Eastern Conference Finals? It was the Celtics and Heat. This year, it was, again, the Celtics and the Heat. They both have young teams. Miami still has Eric Spoelstra from when he was coaching, the big three with LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. And now it's essentially a complete rebuild with a whole bunch of young guys. Mentioned Tyler Hero. There's still Jimmy Butler, right? Bam Adebayo was not really much of a threat in the Eastern Conference Finals, but he's still a very good player. I wouldn't necessarily say Philadelphia because it seems as though Joel Embiid does have an issue with injuries. Like, I feel like whenever Joel Embiid is hurt, the team does not really the performance for Philadelphia drops. I'll put it that way. Yes, there is James Harden, but he can only do so much, right? And with the Bucks, of course, there's Giannis and Chris Middleton, but after that, it's really a bunch of role players. And I think the Bucks they're a threat, but I don't think they're as big of a threat as Miami.
Yeah, I have to come in and say that too. I think Miami really shows in the Eastern Conference that they're really hungry for that championship again. It's been a decently long time since they've won it, and I think that's gonna be something to watch. I've been hearing some rumors about Bradley Beal possibly coming to Miami. So, I mean, we always have to remember that in the offseason, these teams can just look radically different from where they are right now. I mean, they can always get some new stars, they can lose some stars. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Though I do want to say, I mean, I think you're always going to hear some excuse in every loss, like, oh, I mean, Chris Middleton was out. I mean, we had Rob Williams. He played in 3 games out of 7 in that series, right? And we still won. I mean, and we saw later on how important he was to our efforts. I mean, we beat the Nets with Rob Williams barely playing. So, I mean, I feel like if you're talking about fitness and stuff, you can always find some way of spinning it to kind of justify that. And I don't want to really take away from those wins. Like, I think that would be kind of like unfair, like, because at the end of the day, you can only do I mean, it's not the Celtics' fault that they played them without the Chris Middleton. They just played them without Chris Middleton and they beat them. So I think, as a sports team, you're always gonna have situations where your important players get injured, and part of the really great teams is how they adapt to that, right?
And injuries are part of the game. I mean, you have to, what good teams do is they prepare for any of these any of these situations. I mean, we could have said if Jason Tatum got hurt, would the Celtics have gone to the NBA Finals? I would say the answer is probably no. And Chris Middleton got hurt, and it just so happened to be that the Bucks lost in the second round against the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics beat the Heat. Tyler Hero wasn't playing, but we had our injury problems as well. I mean, it goes around in the NBA, and it's just, of course, it's unfortunate when injuries happen in the playoffs. Memphis, or was it Gary Payton got hurt against Memphis, and then he came back in the NBA Finals. So like Golden State had their injuries. I mean, they didn't have them for game 1. Eventually, they had them for game 2 onwards. But everybody
Remember Curry got injured in game 3, and then there was doubt of like his status for game 4. So it happened to even Steph Curry, right? So injuries are just sort of part of the game for everyone. I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I think it's going to be interesting. The Eastern Conference next year, I think it's still at least good that there's going to be some parity. Like we don't know it for sure going into the season who's going to be making it. So I think that's at least good. There's some competition, which is always a good thing. So yeah, that'll sort of be it. So our next question is just Jalen Brown. He's under contract for 2 more years, and are you kind of concerned that going into next season, it's almost like a boom or bust type of situation? Because like, I don't know, there's always the internal thing, right? Like if next year doesn't work, he's going into a contract year. And do you have any kind of like doubts or anything like that going to next year about like potentially losing Jalen Brown to free agency?
Nah, I don't see that. I don't see that happening. I mean, he's got 2 years left. I mean, for it to happen in free agency, would have to take at least 2 years. But I think at least for the next 2 years, I think the Celtics should be fine, at least for the next 2 years. I mean, barring some sort of like major catastrophe or something in which he's traded or something like that happens, I don't really see anything like that happening. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier before, is that breaking up the chemistry as a team is probably the worst thing you could do to the team at this point.
No, I'm not talking about breaking up the chemistry. I'm talking about if Jalen Brown decides to leave, if he's dissatisfied with the status of the Celtics.
Well, I mean, that's a question for like a couple of years from now. So I think we can get to that a couple of years from now. But if that's, I guess it really comes down to like which other teams would want to add him. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of suitors. But I mean, Jalen Brown, since he is a young player and his career is moving upward, and he is potentially going to get a lot more lucrative contracts. So it's going to be up to the Celtics to keep him here, right? They're going to have to make an effort to keep him here and give him a good contract. So yeah, if that happens, and I think the Celtics have enough sense in their head to actually give him a quality contract, then I don't think he'll be going anywhere. Especially because he's been to the finals, and I think most young players want to be on a team that has a chance of winning a championship. And when you have great players around you, I think he's going to want to stick with that. Of course, I can't get inside his head, but I mean, this is probably what I'd be thinking if I were him.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I think we'll have to see going into next year. If there's not an extension with the Celtics, then obviously this becomes a big concern of whether Jalen wants to do the whole Kyrie thing and be the man himself somewhere else and try that out. Obviously, I think from the Celtics point of view, they want to keep these 2 players for the rest of their life with the Celtics. And I think that's the way they've kind of built them with, Smart and Rob Williams being, not max guys, so that they're able to keep these 2. But for now, I think all should be well, hopefully, in terms of Jalen's feelings towards the Celtics.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that Brad Stevens kind of now knows that this team is in win now mode. So that's how he approaches his offseason in terms of making like offseason like additions, and I think that's how he's going to pitch it now to other free agents, saying this is a team that went to the NBA Finals, came 2 games short. You can be the difference maker now. So I think in terms of that, I think the Celtics, like the contention window is open now. Like it's wide open. Before we couldn't really definitively say that, but now we know for sure that this is a real title contender. So I think that's how Brad Stevens needs to operate now. He needs to make moves to really help this team chance directly win the finals next year. Like that's how he should sort of operate now. Before it was just sort of making the team respectable going into the season, but now expectations have changed. So I'm hoping that's what Brad Stevens, and that's what it seems like he's talking about, because he's talked about specifically about how the team needs to actually like add more scoring off the bench. So he knows exactly what the team needs to sort of like get to that next level. So I will say that it is something that Brad Stevens needs to consider, like sort of going forward, because like if there is no extension, then yeah, the following year becomes kind of a whole uncertainty. Is he going to stay? Is he not going to stay? And that's just drama that you don't want ever. Like after seeing what happened with the whole Kyrie thing in 2019, it's not fun to deal with for anyone, right? So it's always like a very undesirable situation. So I really hope they can kind of get an extension in place.
Maybe it was fun for Kyrie, but that's a different story.
I mean, even Kevin Durant that year, right? Like there was a whole like, is he going to stay in Golden State? Is he going to leave? Right? It's not fun for those teams, right? It's always like a cloud over your head at that point. Like even LeBron in 2018, right? After they lost to the Warriors, like is he going to stay? Is he not going to stay? It's always that type of question. It's a very hassling question to have to deal with. So I really hope they can kind of avoid it if necessary.
Yeah, I'd agree. Let's just say wait and see, and hopefully they're going to be still selling Jalen Brown jerseys in Boston for forever.
Okay. Yep. All right. So what grade do you give the Celtics for the entire season, and what grade do you give them for their play in the NBA Finals? 2 questions, so 2 grades.
Okay. So if I had to grade their play in the NBA Finals, it's got to easily be like a C minus D plus or something like that. It's below average, like borderline terrible. It's not a fail because they were up against a really good team, but it was pretty bad. They just made there were a lot of self-inflicted wounds, just making routine mistakes of just like losing loose balls, like giving away like bad steals, stuff, just like simple mechanics that should have been taken care of. But that's just the finals, right? Overall for the whole season, right? If winning the finals is an A, then I think making it to the finals, fair enough, should be an A minus or a B plus at worst, right? If I want to be extra harsh on them, I'm probably going to give them a B plus. Yeah, I guess you could have been harsher if their expectations were high and they didn't live up to them. But I think this team definitely overachieved considering where they were earlier on in the season. So maybe I'm going to ding them a little bit, give them below an A minus just because of just how badly they fell in the finals. So, but I don't think they really deserve anything below a B plus.
Yeah, I'd say when you look at the whole finals, it kind of reminds me of the Patriots season where I was like a half and half regular season and very poor in there against the Bills. But again, like if you're looking at the whole season, I mean, I'd be more charitable. I'd give it an A. I mean, it's Ime Udoka's first year with no head coaching experience. I'd love for you to point me out anyone here, like a head coach who in their first year with no experience went up against a team like the Warriors and came away with the trophy. I don't think that's something that really happens very often. So I think making it to the finals, and let's not forget, I mean, the finals weren't like, I mean, we took them to 6 games, right? Lest we forget, there were quite a few Cavaliers Warriors finals that were much less, exponentially less competitive than the time we gave them. And I mean, let's be real, after like game 3, there were a lot of people saying this was the Celtics. You know, they were like, oh, I mean, Draymond Green was having a meltdown. I mean, a lot of people thought that this was our year. So I gotta say, in the finals, I mean, I'll give him like a C plus or a B minus for that, because in my opinion, I mean, taking the Warriors to 6 games and at least like making the games, like, yeah, we obviously blew some leads that really could have turned this series, but I think the fact that we really did give them a fight, at least in really most of the games we played, was really credible. And most importantly, I think this season is really going to be something that the team can build on going forward. And I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be just as valuable.
I was gonna say that for the overall season, I would probably give it, probably a B. Considering the start of the season, like regular season, it was like, remember, this team was below 500, like going into January. So like, let's not forget about that. But then, of course, I do give them credit for the turnaround and being the 2 seed. I did not see that coming. The playoffs, I felt that I would I would say I would say probably a B plus. I mean, I will not forget the time Marcus Smart took the last 5 shots of Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals and missed them all. And what should have been a comfortable win in Game 7 was not a comfortable win. So, but I think for the NBA Finals, it probably have to give it like a C. I'm afraid, in the sense that the team should have won Game 4. Like they did not need to give up that massive run late in the fourth quarter. And I felt like even though they held Steph Curry in Game 5, they did nothing in Game 6, especially in the first half, and it was almost over by halftime. So I would say like a B, and then perhaps and B for the regular season and a C for the NBA Finals.
I guess I'm not as harsh, but I think, listen, when you look at everything, they were the second best team in the league for this year, which for all that it's worth, I would say that has to be an A minus. I don't think anyone came into this season going, this is the team making the NBA Finals. Maybe at best, people thought, let's hope for an Eastern Conference Finals appearance playing, the Bucks or Nets, and especially given the morale of the team being an 11th seed, being 18-21 midway through the season, to create that turnaround is not an easy feat. So credit to the players and coaches. The finals, I think for me, I guess I'd go C plus or B minus. I think, this came down to poise, experience, and maturity. And, we just didn't have it. And I think that's something through, we've had Eastern Conference Finals losses before, and that's how we, I think, maybe had the poise to get to the finals this year. And maybe this is just something they need to go through to get to a finals win. So I think A minus and C plus are what I would say.
Okay, yeah, I would also give them an A minus for the season, considering where they were at the start of the season, where nobody expected them to reach the finals, to the middle of the season, where they were 18-21, and they were also, even after that point, they were 25-26 at one point. So I mean, they were just sort of like at that point, everything sort of changed like from January onward. So I mean, I would have to give them an A minus for the season. For the finals, I will give them a C minus. They won 2 games, but their last 3 games brought it down pretty considerably. Let's just put it like this: if they had won the finals, I'd probably give them an A plus. But the C minus kind of puts it to an A minus instead. So still a very good year.
Well, in what circumstance would you not give someone an A plus for winning the finals? That's what I want to know.
That's a good question. Maybe I don't know. I mean, do we give the Warriors an A plus overall for the whole season?
I guess. If you win, you win, right? That's the goal. So, unless I guess you could say if you blow them out in 4-game sweep, but I don't know. You're at the end of the day, you're coming up against the best team in the opposite division.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I guess I would have probably given them, A plus for sure. They were trending in the A plus direction if they had won this. But I think the finals, the last 3 games brought it down to an A minus, which is still very good. So, but yeah, we'll see. I think next year, I think expectations are high again. But that does also make me a little nervous now because, as we've seen in the past, anytime sort of expectations were put on this team, that's when the team sort of doesn't do that well. They seem to do very well when expectations are very low on their end. Like entering 2017-18 with rookie Tatum, second-year Brown, they made it to the conference finals, right? And then when expectations were high the following year with Kyrie and Hayward healthy, they really struggled that year. So I am hoping that they are now grounded and they sort of know that, and they don't take it for granted that they're the team to be in the finals. They shouldn't have that mindset again because they're not that good yet to think like that. So I'm hoping they are at least humbled by this, and we'll see. Okay, and now this is kind of a nice question. What was your favorite Celtics memory from the season? I know a lot of people might have different stuff. Yeah.
For me, it's not really any particular moment, but it's just kind of like seeing them turn things around after that first half where they were pretty much like the laughing stock of the league, and then just seeing game by game, like, maybe this team is up to something. And of course, this kind of culminated like late in the season when I fortunately got to see them live play against the Grizzlies. So I got to go see them at FedEx Forum, which is a fun experience. I'm always going to remember that because it was my first time going to an away game. Obviously, I've been to a Celtics game in Boston. I've been to that playoff game in 2019 that they lost to the Bucks. So it was kind of nice to see a Celtics victory on the road. And it was a cool experience. Of course, seeing that playoff run, I mean, probably that should have been the best memory, but I kind of saw that as a culmination of all the brilliance that I saw all throughout that second half of the season. And just that whole run just seemed magical. It was magical until it wasn't, obviously, until they lost, right? But it was good while it lasted, though.
Yeah, I'll say my favorite memory is Game 3 of the NBA Finals. I think there was at least very temporarily, again, like Ron was saying, there's a feeling of kind of shutting down the critics and that the Celtics were really going to just take this whole thing home. I mean, it was a really sweet victory. Great performances from players like Jalen Brown, and of course that was a game like Draymond Green got fouled out. So just another nice kind of rivalry moment for us. So I'd say that was my favorite memory.
I was gonna say, I think it was Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Bucks, and Grant Williams having 27 points and 7 threes. That was just fun to just, our trust in our role players, the guys all telling him to keep shooting if he's wide open, and obviously that's an elimination game. So for Grant to put on that type of show, that was huge.
I'm gonna go with the moment in the same series as in the Eastern Conference semifinals, but I'm referring to the Al Horford game. I believe it was 3 or 4.
Game 4.
Game 4. Yeah, thank you. When Giannis dunked all over him, and Al Horford later on the fourth quarter dunked all over him, and the Al Horford game will always stick to me. And I never expected Al Horford to have a game of his life especially with a team that's centered around Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. That was fun to watch, I must say.
Yeah, for me, it's a different Al Horford game. It's game 1 of the finals when they were down 12 entering the fourth quarter, and then Al Horford, Derek White, Jalen Brown led the charge. And I was actually at that game, so being in the arena and everyone just being stunned while I'm like yelling, "Let's go Celtics!" That was a very fun experience for sure, just to be there. Yeah, even though the team fell short, I mean, it was a memory I'll hold for a long time. So hopefully there are more memories to be made going forward. But that was probably my favorite one. Second one was probably finally watching Max Strus try to hit his final 3, Horford getting the rebound and then going down to the floor after game 7 crying. That was such a sweet moment too. Those were probably my 2 favorite moments, both involving Al Horford. So yeah, I mean, it was a great season overall. So and I guess what is your prediction for the 2022 to 2023 NBA season? Like, I mean, you can make finals picks, you can do really whatever you want, like however much detail you want to give.
Yeah, I think the finals are going to be. I think they're going to be Sixers, Grizzlies, and I got the Grizzlies next year. That's kind of what I have at this point. I think in the East, the Sixers are probably like the kind of the sleeper pick, and I think the Grizzlies are kind of the sleeper pick in the West. And generally, I've seen that teams who go to the finals, they tend to not make it back the following year. Dynasties are not very common. Of course, Golden State's an exception to that. So I think all those teams that kind of made it to the playoffs, made it far, but didn't really quite get over the line, they're gonna be a lot more hungry next year. And I definitely think that Memphis has what it takes, right? Because they also took Golden State to 6 games, and they were not that far from from taking them all the way and potentially even beating them. I mean, John Morant got hurt, and if he's healthy next year, I think the Grizzlies have a pretty good chance. And for the Sixers, I think they probably will have learned a lot from that second round crash out against the Heat. And I think Joel Embiid is going to have another great season. And I think those are pretty much the teams to beat next year. I mean, if I had to make like a second guess as to who might win, I might go with the Nuggets though, because Nikola Jokic, he's been dynamite, right? And he's the league MVP. So I gotta put that one over there. In terms of like Vegas odds and stuff, obviously like the Warriors are the most favored and the Celtics are the second most favored. But I disagree with that because I think there's a lot of recency bias in that. Generally speaking, teams that win don't really tend to do well the following year, or teams that get to the finals also tend to not do well the following year. Now, that said, I don't think that the Celtics are going to be a non-contender. I think they're going to be contender for a really long time, but it's probably going to be a few more years before I see them go to another finals. That's just my personal opinion.
I'm going to try to have a little bit of fun with this. I'm going to go from the West. I'm going to go with Dallas. I think Luka Doncic is an exciting player to watch. And, he has a very good supporting cast. I mean, considering the way that Dallas just absolutely blew Phoenix aside in the Western Conference semifinal Game 7. I think that was a game that really put them kind of on the map. And for the East, I feel like it's still very much wide open, but I actually think that the Celtics will be recharged from this experience and they're going to come back. So I'm going to go Celtics Mavs NBA Finals in a year's time.
I think the Celtics and Bucks in the East will be the conference finals, and that'll be interesting. And I'd say probably Clippers and Suns in the Western Conference. I think both teams will be motivated. Paul George and Kawhi on having basically an off year in terms of injuries, and then the Suns, the way their season ended this year, I think they're going to be motivated to get CP3 a ring. So I'm going to go with those four teams in the Final Four.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess I'd say I think the Celtics will be back next year too. I actually think they're gonna win it all. I'm getting some serious Miami Heat 2013-14 kind of vibes from them. So I think that's gonna be pretty special next year.
Wait, are you talking about Miami Heat 2013 or 14 or San Antonio Spurs 13-14?
Oh, I meant Miami Heat 2012-2013.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I meant. Yeah, they're gonna have the sting of an initial defeat, and then next year they're gonna bring it home. But I think they're gonna probably come up against the Heat in the Eastern Conference. I think it's gonna be a really nice budding rivalry. I think in general the Celtics have some nice budding rivalries with pretty much all the main contenders in the East. I mean, so I think that's gonna be fun. In the West, I'm not totally sure. I don't think Golden State's gonna be coming back for the finals next year. But I think I would agree that the Grizzlies look really good, and I guess I'll have some fun and say maybe the Hawks will figure out what to do with their performance with Trae Young, and maybe he'll grow from having really been smothered in this playoff exit and figure out a way to really drag the team, really bring the team up to the Western Conference or something. So I'm going to say Celtics, Grizzlies, and then probably Celtics win in 7.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on how much creativity we want to go. So, I mean, the Clippers have sort of not been healthy the last few years. The Lakers were an absolute mess this season, but I'm going to go with that for my Western Conference, Clippers, Lakers. And I guess Celtics I'll go with Celtics, Philly for the East this year. And it'll be Celtics, Clippers in the finals. That'll be a very interesting finals.
Yeah, I also got Celtics, Philly, the East. Except I got Philly winning the East.
Memphis winning the West. No, I mean it could happen.
I have Memphis winning the West against Denver.
Denver. Okay. Yeah, I mean Denver's a good team. The West is actually pretty open too. I mean Denver, Lakers. I don't know. I mean the Lakers probably shouldn't be mentioned there right now because they missed the playoffs altogether. But yeah, and I guess one last question. This wasn't sort of there, but I was thinking, right? So I mean, as Boston sports, like a long time. Like we've seen plenty of highs and we've seen some lows, not that many lows, but I mean, where does this sort of defeat kind of rank among the Boston sports like championship losses? I mean, I guess we've seen
I
like
would-
we've seen a couple Patriots losses.
I don't know. Like
Two
of all the
Celtics.
defeats that sting, I think this one stings the least because it was against a truly good team like the Warriors.
I would say the one that stings the most is 2019 Bruins Game 7 Stanley Cup Final. That one stung really badly. Game 7 Stanley Cup Final at home, like against and your favorite to win, and you just.
Well, what
did not-
about the Patriots as well? Like the Eagles.
Well, I would go to the undefeated season if you're going Patriots. Undefeated 18-0, and West misses a catch that would have been a first down.
Oh no, that
Probably-
was the other Super Bowl.
Was
West
that
missing the
2011?
catch. The West missing the catch was 2011.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So I mean, both of those Super Bowls, 2007 and 11, those sting for me.
Yeah, I mean, this probably stings the least among all their losses. But
It
it
might
still
sting
hurts.
more. It might sting more if the Lakers win because we were denied banner 18, and if they get banner 18, then this one will probably sting more.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we'll have to see. Yeah, I mean, I guess it was a good season overall. But yeah, no, this will sort of does anyone and I guess in terms of before we move on to Arnav's podcast, just discussing that a little bit, does anyone else want to bring up anything else on the season? Overall, I think it's a great season. I mean, great season. I just hope that they can kind of build off this and hopefully they continue to grow and hopefully at some point they can win that championship, number 18.
Yeah, let's gear up for a good offseason. What we got? What JD Davidson from Alabama, second round,
Yeah.
53rd pick.
Future
granted-
MVP, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, granted, we weren't going to get a good draft pick, right? It's probably really close to last.
Well, I hope he's listening to this because he just heard we're not getting a good draft pick. So now all of a sudden we're gonna have JD hitting threes, MVP. Jokic was the second round.
Oh,
draft pick too, right?
I'd love to be wrong about this. I'd love to see him come and prove me wrong.
But yeah, okay, yeah. I mean that was our episode. Obviously a lot of fun this season, and yeah, we'll definitely continue to cover the off season and everything there and whatnot. Does anyone else want to bring anything else? Final thoughts on the season? Okay. So Arnav, thank you for coming on. It was great having you on after like almost a year. And just quickly for your own podcast, Grateful Living, I just want to give you a moment to just share a little bit in your own words what you like about your podcast and how our listeners can learn more about it, follow. So yep, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I think an interesting thing is as we become adults is we see the world and we try to make our own changes, right? That's our responsibility as we grow into adults is to make society better for those coming after us. And mental health is an important topic. Obviously, if you look at the CDC, for 10 to 34-year-olds, suicide is the number 2 cause of death. And obviously suicide is preventable. So I think the important thing in life is always trying to have these discussions, have these open discussions, check in with people, make sure they're good, continue to provide life advice content, continue to talk about things. It's the main thing I think in life is mindset, right? And if you can think negatively, you can also think positively, right? It's just a difference in the way you're thinking. And so if the more that we can do that, the more we help people out with their journeys. And if there's ever, the 3 types of guests I tend to bring on are people with mental health stories, people with unique life stories, and then people who have found success in their career. And if any of the listeners have a suggestion from those 3 categories, would love to bring them on. Or if you have any other thoughts on what I'm doing, feel free to hit me up. My Instagram is aroy81547. Just message me there. and the YouTube channel is Grateful Living. Yeah, thank you, Amartya, for giving me this platform to talk about Grateful Living.
And thank you, Arna, for doing what you do. And I think especially now it's important. I think the last couple of years with the pandemic and everything, I think there's just a lot more in general awareness about mental health. Not that people didn't have issues with mental health before, but I feel like now there's a lot less stigma around discussing it and just discussing the daily struggles that we all may be going through, whether it's the day-to-day stuff or some of the long-term stuff, or whether it's psychological, physical, whatever it may be. But I think you definitely do some important work in helping people talk about these things, and the more we feel at liberty to talk about what's going on, what's bothering us. I think a lot of these tragic outcomes that so sadly end up happening can be prevented, and I think that, and if it can save lives, then I think that's ultimately that's the ultimate objective, and I definitely commend you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I've lost two friends of mine to suicide, and it's something I don't wish on anybody. And so I think the more open dialogue that we can have, I think in both of my friends' cases, obviously none of us know what was going on ultimately in their minds, but a lot of us have ruminated that, they struggled on their own. And that, as time goes on, if you struggle on your own, that can become a lot, to a point where you want to end the pain. And so I think just having those discussions with friends and family, and who you see on a daily basis is one just easy way to check in with people, ask them how they're really doing. And things like this are really important. I know you guys don't look at it this way, but community in terms of going to watch sports games together, going to talk about sport. I mean, these are all aspects of our life, and kind of keeping ourselves from going too existential, and kind of just making sure we're continuing to enjoy daily life and not going too far into, negative thoughts. And so community, people probably don't think of it this way, but like community and sports, and going and watching games together, or having, Sunday night football game, like watching Sunday football with friends, and things like all of that shapes, how we're doing in our life. And I think sports is a good way to kind of just get our minds off of things and things like that. So it's very helpful.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Arna, for all the work you do. It is great to see your podcast having grown, and I love how you bring in different guests of different backgrounds all the time to speak. So keep on doing the great work, and hopefully we will continue to. You're always welcome back on to the Nest podcast too, to discuss Patriots, Celtics, whatever sports you want to discuss. So
thank you.
Yep.
I will. Anytime you want me on, I'm here. This is it's a fun time, and it's good because you have to really back up your theories when you got 5 other guys questioning what you're saying. So you really have to back it up. So it's good.
Hey, we got a full summer ahead of us, so we got a whole slate of Red Sox games. Of course, that's pretty much the only thing going on over the summer until we get to the fall and the other sports starts to start up. And of course, November we got the World Cup coming up, so that it's going to be a really interesting sports calendar. And of course, I mean, I know this is mainly about the Celtics, but hey, the Red Sox are doing well too, right? I mean, they're pretty much on a tear right now, and they're 11 games behind in the AL East. Even though that sounds like a lot, they're 11 games behind the Yankees, who are like essentially the best record in baseball. And a few weeks ago they weren't a playoff team, and now I would even say that they're a solid playoff contender.
Yeah, so
that's
it just shows you that Boston sports still reigns strong even since Tom Brady left. So
if the Avs can win it tonight, then the Tampa Bay dynasty is over.
Yeah, but anyways, no, it was great having you all on today, and we'll be continuing to have episodes every week, or we'll try to have them every week throughout the summer until football season begins. Mac Jones year 2. So in the meantime, have a great rest of your day, everyone. and we will be back. I don't know about next week because that's 4th of July week, but we will be back soon to discuss more Boston sports news. Until then, have a good one, guys.
All right, peace.
Thank you guys.